Today, I want to give you some cool, interesting advice from successful venture capitalists. Now, when you're just listening or reading from very successful people, they tend to talk about a lot of big things. One of them is venture capital. And what is venture capital if you have no idea what it is? Basically, to summarize it in middle school terms or elementary school terms, it's a firm or a organization or a company or business or group of people who have a lot of money, get that money from other people, and invest that or give it to a business they think is worthy enough to take it, who they think will make a lot of money with it. And today's advice comes from two very successful venture capitalists. The first is Chris Sacca. He is a billionaire behind some of the big companies of today, including Uber. And the second is Peter Thiel. He's another billionaire, a author of the book Zero to One, which is a great book. Some points I didn't necessarily agree with, but it's a great book nonetheless. And he is also a investor, and also he's a venture capitalist, and he's also a co-founder of many successful businesses, including PayPal. So let's start with Chris Sacca. So he was asked on a recent Tim Ferriss podcast about if there was any core common traits that he looked for, that he found common throughout all the people that he invested in that went on to create massive wealth. And he said that the core thing that he found was a undeniable assuredness that their business would succeed and flourish. There was no doubt in their minds throughout the process. And he invested in some of the big ones, including Twitter early on and Uber. And he said that without a doubt, if you looked at any of these founders, at any point during their journey, they had no doubt in their minds that they would succeed. So before I continue though, I really don't think you should take this advice and use it broadly. These two people specialize specifically in more so these tech or new age type startup businesses. So this is a specific type of business industry. And from what I have experienced from other people in other businesses in other industries, including, I don't think this is the case. I'm not sure you can point to all the billionaires in all the industries. And I'm telling you, there's so many different industries, from hair products to brick and mortar bookstores and so on, to fast food restaurants. I don't think you could say the same thing for a lot of these companies. There is a certain level of caution and preparedness and fear, and then preparedness to counteract that fear of failure, that allows certain businesses to move about and prepare for potential failure in the future. However, you may be able to apply this advice to specific types of businesses. Now, what does Peter Thiel say? He says that such a small amount of businesses invested in actually succeed that you really have to make sure that you're choosing the right one. And therefore, your focus should be entirely on finding those few businesses that succeed, rather than trying to diversify and slow your chances of, rather than diversify and protect yourself. And this is definitely specific to venture capital in the specific industries that he's into. Why? Because of the dynamics and math behind the industry. Based on how it works, such a small percentage actually make it. And the ones who actually do, they don't just make it, they flourish, and they make up the great majority of the money made in the industry. So some of the big ones are now creating a large percentage of the GDP. These were all big venture funded companies, including Twitter, Facebook, and so on. And with all these companies, I think, you know, and so his whole piece of advice is you want to just look for the ones that have the potential. Here's the key: the potential to create an enormous amount of wealth. And to do so usually means that it is on a large, and to do so usually means that the business or industry is capable of expanding to many, many people, possibly millions, which automatically narrows down the amount of businesses that he considers, because if it doesn't have that potential, he cannot make the enormous amount of money back. Anyhow, he describes it a lot better in his book, 0 to 1. He lays out a bit of math to explain it. Long story short, it's either a home run and you invest a lot of money into these, or you don't. Long story short, it's either a home run and you only invest in the companies that have that potential to create enormous wealth, or you don't. You don't diversify, because otherwise you're not getting your money back. And only these big ones, which are very, very uncommon, actually make the money. And not just make the money, but make a great majority of the money. Most of his winners, his top 2 winners in his venture capital firm, make up like 80 or 90% of the wealth he's made. Another huge point he made is once you identify a winner, you want to go in hard. And that means investing a lot of money towards these things. The reason being is because if you don't, then you won't get. The reason being is because if you don't, then you're not getting enough back from it. Chris Sacca has said something similar. He said that he once invested a lot of money in a company, and then a few years later, the company was doing profitably, but he barely made his money back. And Peter Thiel in his book says that he has this friend who invested $250,000 in Instagram, and he made a lot back. But because he was doing it on behalf of his firm, that one win did not account for all the other losses, and it was such a small percentage of the amount of money being managed by the firm that really didn't help. So that was an instance where he should have intensified his. That was an instance of where he should have intensified the amount he invested. Again, I really encourage you not to start using this outside of the specific industries and the specific type of investing that this is geared towards, because I really don't think it works for everything. You can't just broadly arch this over for everything. And from my experience, I don't think it works for other things. But if you're in that field, venture capital, tech startups, potentially useful information. Finally, I want to finish up with this final bit of advice from Peter Thiel, and he kind of says something along the lines of, why not tend to the winners rather than spending all your time with the losers? He mentions how some people in the venture capital field, they spend all their time trying to help the losers who are struggling and failing, rather than attending to the businesses that were invested in that are doing very clearly well. And he says it's partially due to the psychology and commitment that these venture capital firms have put into these businesses through their investment. So that's all I got to say. Again, all of my information provided in this video is just my amateur advice, subject to change through future opinions in the future, so take it with a grain of salt and realize that it may be wrong. That's all I gotta say. Thanks so much for watching, and stay tuned for my book review in the Billionaires Book Club series, where I will be reviewing and reading books by billionaires. And the next one will be, of course, Peter Thiel's Quick Read 0 to 1, which is quite fascinating. So stick around for that. I'll see you in my next video, hopefully. Thanks for watching.